Inside this mega prison, you'll find some of El Salvador's most dangerous gang members packed into massive cells in what looks like bird cages.
After decades of dealing with gang violence, El Salvador is now seeing a change since President Nayib Bukele is taking strict action against it. Building a mega prison was one of the major steps of this whole crackdown against gangs and cartels. And this mega prison isn't some ordinary one.
At least 68,000 people have been arrested. Conditions at CECOT could become inhumane and degrading because no one has access to that prison.
Join me as I take you inside El Salvador's mega prison, where punishments are as horrifying as they can get. Let's get started. How is this prison different from others? For the longest time, El Salvador's prisons have been controlled by gangs and cartels instead of the government. And there are several reasons why this happened. First of all, these gangs were the primary inhabitants of these prisons, and the lack of strict rules made them the most fearsome ones. They induced fear and obviously made their own rules behind bars too. Not only that, the government making pacts with these gangs in order to keep peace also caused major issues. One more thing that many critics have mentioned is the presence of members from the same gang in the same cells for a long time. Since the prisons before the mega prison was built didn't have enough space to keep these members away from each other, putting them together became normal. And what happens when you put the same gang members in the same place? Terror and criminal acts. Keeping all these factors in mind, Bukele's administration had to build a prison that didn't have the same issues. And it's safe to say that they almost succeeded in doing so. The mega prison doesn't let the prisoners rule. Instead, it's the prison guards who take control, or it'd only be right to say that the prison guards are the ones inflicting violence. People who have been there tell the tale, and it's pretty clear how strict the situation inside is. Members of different gangs are put together in the same cells, while the living conditions are worse than you can even imagine. Imagine getting caught and being put among your enemies. The crackdown and inhumane treatment. Since the mega prison became functional, Bukele's administration has made it mandatory to keep gang members in lockdown in prisons. While other prisons might have issues, nothing can compare to how inmates are treated in this mega prison. No wonder there have been several calls from human rights activists to put an end to this torture. Some reports even suggest that Bukele announced that the use of lethal force by the security forces is also allowed. But why, you might ask? Isn't torture enough? Why is there a need for lethal force? Well, he stated that it's for self-defense and to protect the lives of Salvadorans. And just so you know, many reports have revealed several deaths inside the mega prison too. While the number of deaths inside the mega prison isn't confirmed, reports do suggest that over 153 people have already died while in custody during El Salvador's gang crackdown. The report by the human rights group Cristosal stated that 29 of these deaths were confirmed as violent, while 46 were considered suspicious. Not only that, but most of these cases showed visible signs of torture, beatings, and even strangulation. Other than that, the deaths that were classified as natural or undetermined were also probably not very natural. Instead, these bodies also had injuries. So it's safe to say that the number of violent deaths might be more than what's known so far. None of these people in question have yet been found guilty of the crimes they were arrested for. The cases that the human rights organization studied were not just limited to people who died of strangulation. In fact, some had signs of electric shocks, while others had most probably died because of puncture wounds. Noah Bullock, the director of Cristosal, said that all of these findings confirm that human rights violations were a systematic practice rather than an exception under the current government of El Salvador. Now the question is, if this is all happening outside of the mega prison, what horrors go on inside? Well, let's talk about that. Prison guards, the real horror. Many YouTubers and other personalities have already visited the mega prison, and from the looks of it, it's pretty clear that this prison is more of a torture cell than anything else. I'll tell you about everything in detail, but first, let's talk about what one of the former inmates told Cristosal about the insides of the prison. The 23-year-old stated that when he, along with others, arrived at the prison, the guards took them off the bus. The next thing they were asked to do was to bend over, and then they were forced to kneel on the gravel. Apparently, the prisoners were forced to kneel for almost half an hour, and even the sick ones didn't get any mercy. According to the former inmate, the guards there don't look at the inmates as humans, and it shows in their actions. Another case tells a more detailed account of what happens inside. Diego, a 22-year-old student, was wrongfully thrown into the mega prison just a few days after the state of emergency began. Reports state that he had only gone out to get some tortillas when the police took him to a holding cell for a background check. Even though he had no criminal record and nor had any connections with any gangs yet, he still found himself behind bars. And surprisingly enough, Diego wasn't really scared of the gangs he was sharing the space with. According to him, the prison guards would torture everyone, and he could hear the cries of people all night long. Well, I guess that's what Bukele was talking about when he said that the use of lethal force would be implemented. Anyway, let's see the living conditions inside this prison, which obviously aren't very humane either. Living conditions, no less than a punishment.
Inside the cells, the beds are metal plates, and there are 2 toilets open to the room.
Bukele doesn't believe in the correction or counseling of prisoners, and once you've seen the mega prison, you'll understand why I say so. The prison has a total of 8 buildings, and each building consists of 32 cells designed to hold up to 100 inmates. But here's the issue. These cells are not fun to be in. Each of them has 2 sinks and 2 toilets. Not only that, all these criminals have to sleep in 4-tier bunk beds without any mattresses or pillows. The reason why there are no mattresses is so that the prisoners can't hide anything in their beds. Also, the lights in the cells are never turned off, not even at night. From what I know, this is solely to make the prisoners lose track of time. I mean, this is the same reason why there are no clocks in the entire cell either. But you must be wondering about the prisoners who might have some medical conditions. Well, for them, the prison has medical professionals who come there every day and leave the required medication for the inmates. Most prisons in the world have some recreational areas for the inmates, such as playgrounds or gyms. But this prison is different in this matter too. The good parts are only for the guards, and prisoners can never leave. The prison actually has everything, including dining halls, table tennis tables, and exercise rooms. But nope, they are not for the prisoners. Instead, they are for the guards only. For the prisoners, it's just the cells they're allowed to stay in, and they only get to get out of there when they have a legal hearing via video conference, or when they have to be punished in unlit, windowless isolation cells. In short, getting out of those cells isn't really a relief for them. In fact, whenever a prisoner has to leave the cell, they're tied in hand and foot cuffs before they can get out of the cell. Imagine staying stuck in the same cell for years. I'm talking about prisoners who've been sentenced anywhere between 20 to thousands of years in jail. There's no excuse one can make to get out of there for even a minute. Everything is done inside, from bathrooms to medical checkups. The cells are equipped with everything. In short, unless an inmate has completed their sentence, there's only one way out, and that's if they die.
We have made a commitment to the people of El Salvador that they will never be released.
The isolation cells. Whenever a prisoner is caught going against the rules or committing an infraction, they are sent to the isolation cell. Once inside the cell, it's locked with a padlock from outside. And any of you who might think it's not a torturous punishment, lock yourself in a room alone without any distractions for 2 days, and you'll know. The isolation cells in the mega prison are probably the worst part. The only light that comes inside these cells is through a hole in the ceiling, and the hole is pretty small as a tennis ball, I believe. These cells consist of a toilet seat, a slab that is used as a bed, and a water tub. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Prisoners are kept there for psychological torture, and trust me, no one in the mega prison likes being there. The number of hours that these inmates spend here depends on the level of infraction they've committed. The isolation rooms are dark and small. If one is claustrophobic, this might be the end for them. The food is passed through a hatch in the door, and there's no way for the prisoner to interact with the outside world. Also, if the only source of light is turned off, the rooms go pitch dark, and it can be quite disturbing. I would never even wish this upon my worst enemies. The cell extraction. Now, if I talk about keeping the prisoners fit, the inmates are taken out of their cells in a specific number at a time every day. But even at this time, they have cuffs on their hands and feet. Once they're in the designated area, several guards surround them in order to keep them in control. There's always a fear of them rebelling against the prison guards, so the security is kept as tight as possible. The psychology behind keeping enemy gang members in the same cells. I mentioned earlier that enemy gang members are kept in the same cells, but what could be the reason behind this slash? Well, there's a reason behind this, which could also be considered a way of mentally torturing the inmates. They are kept in this manner because this shows them that the gang they once worked for and those for whom they killed innocent people is no longer there for them. It shows that once they're caught, there's no enemy, and all of them have to face the consequences of what they did. If you look at the footage from inside the mega prison, you'll see inmates with different kinds of tattoos. These tattoos are actually an indication of what gang they belong to. And to think of it, it's actually a thought-provoking idea. These inmates weren't alone when doing all those crimes. They had higher-ups giving them orders, and they simply followed them. So why is no one fighting for them anymore? It's like making them rethink their choices. Another reason why they are kept like this is to make them come to a peace agreement. The food is no good either. Being able to eat your favorite foods and having the best drinks is more like a privilege if you know how the inmates in the mega prison are fed. Mostly, breakfast and dinner are the same thing. It's tortillas, rice with beans and cream. Sometimes, even the lunch is the same and no one can complain about it. However, normally, lunch may consist of some other dishes like boiled egg, pasta, or rice made in a different way. But it's important to note that none of the foods ever have any meat in them. Before the food is served, each plate is weighed so that it weighs exactly 1 pound. No one gets a different amount of food. When it's time for food, the prisoners are not allowed to leave their cells. Instead, the food is delivered to each cell. The plates are placed right outside the cell's door, and the prisoners take it from there. Prison guards also keep an eye on when the food is being delivered so that everyone gets their share. Once done with eating, each prisoner is supposed to rinse their dishes in the sink of their cell and leave them all outside the cell. Now here's a surprising fact about the people working in the kitchen. The ones who cook and pack all that food are also prisoners. But guess what? They are not from mega prison because it's only for high-risk criminals and terrorists. These people are brought under supervision from other prisons, and this work is counted as a part of their community service. Now the question is, how many inmates are there? According to Bukele, this prison can hold up to 40,000 people at once. But here's the issue. The way they are filling up this prison, it might not take much time to be full. And once it's at its maximum capacity, estimates tell that each person will only have about 0.58 square meters of space. Just so you know, the International Committee of the Red Cross recommends up to 3.4 square meters of space for each prisoner in a shared cell. So it's safe to say that they are going against the global laws when it comes to filling up this jail. You can say that there are thousands of people already waiting for their turn to be sent there. I wonder what life would look like inside this prison once it's fully packed with convicts. No visiting policy.
Relatives of those detained have been desperately trying to find out what's happened to them.
Staying away from your family and them having no idea what happened to you is no less torture either. In fact, from my point of view, if your actions lead you to a place where your family can't even visit you, there's no punishment bigger than that. The mega jail doesn't allow any visits. You can cry all you want, but it won't let you meet anyone from your family, friends, or anyone else. The families of the prisoners do not get any information about the prisoners either. In short, if you're there, you're practically all alone without a family or friends. Imagine being trapped in a place like that, but once again, you reap what you sow. No rehabilitation. This jail is also different when it comes to preparing the prisoners to be reinstated in society again. Most jails in the world conduct classes, educational programs, and even workshops for prisoners. All of this is done in hopes of making them useful members of society once they get out of jail. But in the mega prison, nothing like this happens. The only exceptions are occasional motivational talks from prisoners who behave appropriately and gain a level of trust from the officials. Even for these talks, the prisoners are asked to sit on the corridor floor in rows while guards continue to supervise them. Many have criticized this practice because many of these prisoners have shorter sentences. And if they're not being prepared to go back into society as good people, then all of this is just useless. But then again, some assume that the ones who enter the mega prison will not leave at all. This is because the security minister, during an interview, stated that they have made a promise with the people of El Salvador that these people will never be released. And if that's so, are the court rulings just for the show? And is this prison more like a cage where once you're trapped there, only death can take you out? These are some questions that I couldn't even get the answers to. But is it all working? The truth about what's happening inside the mega prison, as well as the other jails in El Salvador, is pretty clear. There's no mercy for terrorists and gang members, but the real question is this all really helping? And the short answer is, yes, it is. In March 2022, when Bukele launched this crackdown, the conditions of the country were very different from how they are now. He gave almost free rein to his administration so they could do anything and everything to put an end to the gang violence. And while many have criticized the ways, we can't deny that this crackdown worked better than anyone had imagined. The mass arrests have significantly impacted how youngsters look at gangs. Critics suggest that it has not only cut off the communication between gangs, but also affected their ability to manage their illegal businesses. Not just that, but looking at how the crime rates have dropped in the country, it's safe to say that Bukele's actions actually broke down the whole command structure among gangs. But it has also left many wondering how this crackdown worked, while many others failed miserably. And honestly, it's not very complicated once you understand what exactly he did. There are three main factors that define this whole success: the extreme legal actions, concentration of political power around Bukele's administration, and, most importantly, better interpretations of gang affiliation. When the crackdown began back in 2022, Bukele announced that the country was in a state of emergency. And just so, this kind of announcement is only made in catastrophic situations like a pandemic or earthquakes. Actually, in March 2022, when a series of gang massacres happened, about 87 people were left dead, and this forced the government to take strict action. In fact, the situation was so bad that even the legislators had to agree with Bukele's suggestion. It's also important to note that this is the first time a Salvadoran government has opted for such a way in order to deal with gang violence. At that time, it was going to be a one-month thing only, but as of now, the country has already been in a state of emergency for almost 2 years. The emergency laws allowed police and other authorities to make arrests without needing warrants. Not only that, it also took the right of a lawyer from the arrested members. Not only did it allow them to catch gang members, but also collaborators and those who were suspected of being a part of gang activities indirectly. All of a sudden, There were soldiers and police officers everywhere making arrests without fear, and in only the first 2 months, they had already arrested over 33,000 people. Since the constitutional rights to defense were also dismissed due to the state of emergency, the authorities can hold detainees for an indefinite time period on vague charges. Now, most people think that this was the disturbing part of the whole operation. But here's the thing. It's also the most effective part, because this was the only way the crackdown could succeed. And this isn't all. They have formed new laws too. Since the country cannot stay in a state of emergency for a long time, Bukele's government managed to come up with some new laws. These new laws were specially designed to keep these criminals behind bars in all situations. The jail time for gang members was increased. Not only that, house arrests for these people are no longer acceptable and they have to be kept in jail. But then there's one troublesome part too. These law reforms lowered the age to as low as 12, for which people could be arrested for gang-related crimes. Human rights organizations have been talking about it, but once again, the gangs don't see age, so the government has to take a similar stance. Empty territories. Apart from law enforcement, another action played a major role in the success of this crackdown. The government focused on reducing the presence of major gangs like Barrio 18 and MS-13 from their ruled areas. Before this, these gangs had ruled a large number of territories in the country. Conditions were so bad that in some territories, even the police couldn't enter or do anything about the criminal acts. However, now things have changed, and major gang structures have already almost stopped working. As of now, the residents live freely and no longer have to fear the dominant gang's rules and punishments. The community spaces are now once again reclaimed by the public, and people actually walk freely without fear in their hearts. Even the residents who saw some gang members return from the jail noted that the power game has now shifted. All in all, one can say that while the government's actions against these gangs may seem harsh or even inhumane, the results have been beneficial for the public. However, there's one big issue that must be addressed. Many have been sent to the mega prison as well as others in the country without any evidence. In fact, some people had to spend time in jail even though they were wrongfully arrested. Maybe the government can work on this and avoid arresting those who are innocent. And that is all from the horrors of El Salvador's mega prison. What do you think about the treatment and rules of the prison? Let me know in the comments below. Also, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons. I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.